My name is Marcus Blackwood, and I've been documenting the death of American architecture for the past 6 years. It's not the most glamorous career. Crawling through abandoned factories, climbing rickety stairs in condemned hospitals, breathing in decades of dust and decay. But there's something honest about photographing places that society has forgotten. These buildings tell stories that people don't want to remember. I work freelance, mostly for historical societies and urban planning departments. The pay is inconsistent, but it beats sitting in a cubicle pretending to care about quarterly reports. My apartment in Chicago's Logan Square is small, but filled with thousands of photographs. Black and white images of America's industrial past slowly crumbling into ruin. It was Tuesday morning, October 10th, 2023, when Rebecca Torres called. I'd worked with Rebecca before on several demolition documentation projects. She was thorough, professional, and always paid on time, qualities that made her one of my favorite contacts in the city planning office. "Marcus, I've got something urgent," she said, her usually calm voice carrying an edge of stress. "The Meridian office complex on 5th Street. We need a complete photographic survey before demolition begins next Monday." I pulled up the building on my laptop while she talked. 37 floors of brutalist concrete, built in 1967, abandoned since 2013. It looked like every other failed urban renewal project from the late 60s, all harsh angles and weathered concrete, a monument to optimistic city planning that never quite worked out. "That's a big job for such short notice," I said. "What's the rush?" The demolition company found some irregularities in the original construction documents. The Historical Society wants everything documented before the building comes down, just in case there are any architectural elements worth preserving. Irregularities? Discrepancies between the filed blueprints and what was actually built. Probably just clerical errors from the 60s. But you know how these things go. Better safe than sorry. I quoted her my standard rate, plus a rush fee. She agreed without hesitation, which surprised me. City planning departments usually argued over every line item. "There is one thing," Rebecca added. "The building's been without power for over a decade, and some of the upper floors have structural damage. Be careful in there, Marcus. And maybe don't go alone." "I always work alone. You know that." "I know, but this building, I've had 3 different security guards refuse to do walkthrough inspections. They won't say why, just that the place feels wrong somehow." I laughed. "Rebecca, you know I don't believe in ghost stories." "Neither do I. Just be careful, okay?" After hanging up, I spent the rest of Tuesday researching the Meridian building. The Chicago Public Library's online archives had plenty of information about its construction. The building was commissioned by Meridian Development Corporation as part of a massive urban renewal project. The original plans called for 3 buildings, residential, commercial, and office space, but only the office tower was completed before Meridian went bankrupt in 1969. What struck me as odd was how little information existed about the company itself. Meridian Development Corporation seemed to have appeared out of nowhere in 1965 with enough capital to fund a $100 million construction project, then vanished just as quickly 4 years later. The building changed hands several times over the decades, housing various corporate tenants until the 2008 financial crisis left it mostly empty. Wednesday morning, I loaded my equipment into my Honda Civic. 3 camera bodies, a full range of lenses, portable lighting equipment, and enough batteries to power a small television. The weather forecast called for overcast skies with possible rain. Perfect lighting for architectural photography. The drive downtown took 45 minutes through Chicago's notorious traffic. As I got closer to the financial district, the buildings grew taller and the streets narrower. The Meridian complex sat on a full city block. surrounded by newer glass and steel towers that made it look even more dated and imposing. I parked across the street and studied the building for several minutes. Something about it seemed different from the online photographs. The concrete appeared darker, more weathered. Several windows on the middle floors were broken, but I could have sworn the archival photos showed them intact. The security trailer at the construction entrance was empty. A handwritten sign on the door read, "Back in 15 minutes, 9:30 a.m. My watch showed 11:15. Either the security guard had terrible time management skills, or he'd abandoned his post entirely. The chain-link fence surrounding the property had a gate secured with a heavy padlock. But as I approached, I noticed the lock was hanging open. Fresh bolt cutter marks on the chain suggested someone had cut it recently, then repositioned the lock to make it appear secure from a distance. I should have waited for the security guard. Should have called Rebecca to ask about the missing guard. Should have followed any number of safety protocols I developed over years of photographing dangerous buildings. Instead, I grabbed my camera bag and pushed through the gate. The main entrance was boarded up with plywood, painted over so many times it looked like abstract art. But buildings this size always have multiple entrances, loading docks, emergency exits, maintenance access. I walked around the perimeter until I found what I was looking for. A loading dock with a roll-up door that had been pried open just enough for a person to squeeze through. The smell hit me as soon as I ducked under the door. Every abandoned building has its own particular scent, a mixture of dust, mildew, and decay that accumulates over years of neglect. But the Meridian building smelled different. Underneath the expected odors was something else, something sharp and metallic, like ozone after a lightning strike. The loading dock opened into what had once been a receiving area for deliveries. Concrete floors, cinder block walls, industrial lighting fixtures hanging dark and useless from the ceiling. My footsteps echoed in the empty space as I set up my first shots. Photography in abandoned buildings requires patience. Without power, I had to rely on natural light filtering through windows and doorways, supplemented by portable LED panels when necessary. Each shot required careful consideration of exposure, composition, and safety. Loose floorboards and unstable structures could be deadly for an unwary photographer. I worked methodically through the ground floor, documenting the empty offices and conference rooms. Someone had stripped the building thoroughly before abandonment, not just furniture and fixtures, but everything valuable: copper pipes, electrical wiring, even some of the interior doors. What remained told the story of hasty evacuation. Paper scattered on floors, motivational posters still hanging crooked on walls, coffee mugs abandoned on windowsills. In what had been the main lobby, I found something interesting. The building directory was still mounted on the wall, listing dozens of companies that had once occupied the tower. Most were generic corporate names: Midwest Financial Services, Great Lakes Marketing Associates, Chicago Industrial Supply. But one name caught my attention: Blackwood Industries, Suite 3700. Blackwood, my surname. I'd never heard of any company called Blackwood Industries, and I would have remembered that my family had been involved in something significant enough to afford office space in a downtown high-rise. My father worked as an accountant for a small manufacturing company. My grandfather had been a machinist at a steel mill. We weren't the kind of family that owned corporations. I photographed the directory and made a mental note to research Blackwood Industries later. Probably just a coincidence. Blackwood isn't an uncommon name. The stairwell to the upper floors was a concrete and steel canyon that seemed to stretch infinitely upward. Emergency lighting had failed years ago, leaving only whatever daylight filtered down from windows 37 floors above. I strapped on a headlamp and began climbing. By the time I reached the 5th floor, my legs were burning. By the 10th, I was breathing hard and reconsidering my decision to document every floor individually. The building was massive. Each floor probably contained 20,000 square feet of office space. But as I worked my way upward, I noticed something strange about the floor layouts. According to the building directory, floors should have been numbered consecutively from 1 to 37, but several floors seemed to be missing from the stairwell. I climbed what felt like 3 flights of stairs, but the floor number would only increase by 2. I assumed it was a quirk of the building's design. Many older buildings skip the 13th floor entirely, and some eliminate other numbers considered unlucky by their cultural occupants. Still, it seemed odd that a building constructed in the logical, engineering-focused 1960s would include such superstitious omissions. By Thursday afternoon, I documented the first 15 floors and filled 2 memory cards with images. The work was repetitive but meditative. The same empty offices, the same water-stained walls, the same evidence of hasty abandonment repeated floor after floor. That's when I found the bathroom. I was on the 15th floor, photographing what had been a conference room, when I noticed I needed to use the restroom. I'd been drinking coffee steadily since morning, and the building's abandoned state meant no functioning facilities. Normally, I'd just hold it until I could find a gas station or restaurant, but I still had several hours of work ahead. The floor plan showed restrooms at the end of each hallway, but like everything else in the building, they'd been gutted. Broken pipes and exposed electrical conduit marked where sinks and fixtures had once been installed, except for one. At the end of a hallway on the east side of the building, tucked behind a support column, was a door I hadn't noticed during my initial survey. Unlike every other door in the building, which were standard institutional fire doors painted industrial gray, this one was made of dark wood with brass hardware. A small brass nameplate read simply, "Restroom." The door looked completely out of place. It would appear to be walnut or mahogany, expertly crafted with raised panels and detailed molding. It belonged in an expensive hotel or upscale restaurant, not a utilitarian office building from the 1960s. I tried the handle, expecting to be locked or to open onto another gutted space. Instead, the door swung open smoothly on well-oiled hinges. What I saw inside stopped me cold. The restroom was not only intact, it was immaculate. White subway tiles covered the walls from floor to ceiling, perfectly clean and uncracked. Chrome fixtures gleamed under the light of functioning fluorescent bulbs. The floor was composed of small hexagonal tiles in a classic black and white pattern, without a single chip or stain. This was impossible. The building had been without power for over a decade. Every other fixture had been stripped out years ago. Yet here was a fully functional bathroom that looked like it had been maintained by a professional cleaning service. I stepped inside cautiously, half expecting the illusion to shatter. My footsteps echoed off the tile walls with a crisp clarity that suggested perfect acoustics. The air smelled strongly of industrial disinfectant, not the mustiness that permeated every other part of the building. There were 3 stalls, each with working locks and toilet paper dispensers filled with fresh rolls. 2 urinals with automatic flush sensors that activated as I walked past. A row of 4 sinks with motion-activated faucets that produced hot water and soap dispensers containing fresh liquid soap. I washed my hands, mostly to confirm that everything was real. The water was hot, the soap was real, and paper towels dispensed from a chrome dispenser that looked like it had been installed yesterday. On the counter between 2 of the sinks lay a folded newspaper. I picked it up with hands that had started to tremble slightly. The masthead read Chicago Tribune, but the date made my stomach drop. October 10th, 1987. Exactly 36 years ago to the day. My first thought was that someone was playing an elaborate prank. Urban explorers sometimes left strange objects in abandoned buildings. It was a kind of underground art form. But this newspaper looked authentic. The paper felt right, slightly yellow with age, but not brittle. The printing was crisp, the photographs clear, and the headlines described a world I didn't recognize. Meridian Tower Grand Opening Celebration. Senator Patricia Wells announces RE election campaign. Blackwood Industries stock soars after federal contract. I'd never heard of Senator Patricia Wells. A quick mental review of Illinois political history didn't include anyone by that name serving in the 1980s. But it was the third headline that made my blood run cold. Blackwood Industries, the same company I'd seen listed in the building directory downstairs. According to the article, Blackwood Industries had just signed a major government contract for advanced temporal research applications. Whatever that meant, the article included a photograph of the company's CEO, a man named Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, cutting a ribbon at what appeared to be a laboratory facility. He looked to be in his 50s, with graying hair and intense eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He also looked remarkably like my grandfather. Not identical, but similar enough to be a relative. The same strong jawline, the same deep-set eyes, the same slightly crooked nose that ran in my family. But my grandfather had been a factory worker, not a corporate executive, and he'd certainly never been involved in any kind of scientific research. I folded the newspaper carefully and slipped it into my camera bag. Whether it was authentic or an elaborate hoax, it was worth investigating further. That's when I noticed the bathroom door had closed behind me. I hadn't heard it close, and I was certain I'd left it open. The handle turned freely in my hand, but the door wouldn't budge. It felt solid, immovable, as if it had been locked from the outside. I knocked on the door, calling out in case someone else was in the building. My voice echoed strangely in the tiled space, seeming to bounce back with unusual resonance. Hello? Is anyone there? I'm locked in the restroom on the 15th floor. No answer. I tried my cell phone. No signal. Which wasn't surprising given the building's concrete construction and my location deep inside the structure. But the phone's clock was acting strangely. The display kept flickering between 2:47 p.m. and 2:47 p.m., as if time had stopped. That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone wearing heavy boots. They approached the door, then stopped directly outside. Hello, I called. Can you help me? The door is stuck. The footsteps continued past the door, then faded down the hallway. I waited several minutes, then heard them return. This time they stopped outside the door and remained there. I know you're there, I said. Please, I just need help getting out. A voice answered from the other side of the door. Male, middle-aged, with a slight tremor that suggested either fear or exhaustion. You shouldn't have come here. The voice sounded familiar, though I couldn't place it immediately. Do I know you? Are you security for the building? In a way, yes. I've been securing this building for a very long time. Well, can you unlock the door? I'm a photographer documenting the building for city. I have authorization to be here. A long pause, and what year is it? Strange question. 2023, October 10th, 2023. And what's your name? Marcus Blackwood. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it carried a note of weary resignation. Of course it is. What do you mean, of course it is? I asked. I mean, this has happened before. Many times before. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to understand who I was talking to. The voice was definitely male, somewhere in his 50s or 60s, with Chicago accent similar to my own. I don't understand. Has what happened before. A photographer named Marcus Blackwood, documenting the Meridian building, finding the bathroom that shouldn't exist. It happens every 36 years, like clockwork. This was getting ridiculous. Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I need to get out of here. I have work to finish. Work. The voice laughed bitterly. I used to think it was about work too. Who are you? I'm you, Marcus. Or rather, you're me. We're the same person, separated by 36 years of time. I stepped away from the door, my heart rate spiking. This person was clearly delusional, possibly dangerous. I needed to find another way out of the bathroom. I examined the walls more carefully, looking for any kind of maintenance access or ventilation grate. The construction was solid. Real tile over concrete block. No hollow spaces or hidden openings. You're looking for another way out, the voice said. There isn't one. Believe me, I've had plenty of time to search. You're not me, I said firmly. You're someone who's been hiding in this building, probably living here illegally. I'm going to call the police as soon as I get out. With what phone? Check your signal. I looked at my phone again. Still no bars, and the clock was still frozen at 2:47 p.m. That's impossible. Digital clocks don't just stop working. Time works differently in this room. It's complicated. I decided to humor him while I figured out an escape plan. Okay, let's say I believe you. If you're really me from 36 years in the future, prove it. You have a scar on your left shoulder from when you fell off your bike when you were 7. You were trying to impress Jenny Martinez from down the street. My blood chilled. I did have that scar, and I had gotten it trying to show off for Jenny Martinez. But that wasn't information only I would know. Childhood friends, family members, medical records could contain those details. That's not proof. Anyone who knew me as a kid could know that. You're wearing a St. Christopher pendant that belonged to your grandfather. He gave it to you before he died. Even though neither of you were particularly religious, you wear it because it makes you feel connected to him. My hand went instinctively to my neck, where the small silver pendant hung beneath my shirt. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone, hadn't even thought about it consciously. It was just something I wore every day without thinking about it. How do you know about the pendant? Because I'm wearing one too. Same pendant, same chain. I got it from the same grandfather. This is insane. Time travel doesn't exist. Neither do bathrooms that remain fully functional in abandoned buildings. Yet here we are. I had to admit he had a point. The bathroom's existence defied all rational explanation. Maybe the person outside the door was equally impossible. If you're really me from the future, what happened? How did you end up here? I found this room in 1987, just like you found it today. I was 28 years old, working as a freelance photographer, documenting the Meridian building for a client. Everything exactly as it happened to you. But the building was new in 1987. It wouldn't have been abandoned. No, it wasn't abandoned then. It was fully operational, filled with office workers and corporate tenants. But this bathroom was already wrong, already impossible. I sat down on the closed toilet seat, trying to process what he was telling me. Wrong how? It was too old. Even when the building was brand new, this bathroom looked like it had been there for decades. The fixtures were from the 1940s. The tile work was from the 1920s. It was as if someone had taken a bathroom from an old hotel and somehow inserted it into a modern office building. And you got trapped here? Not immediately. The first time I found it, I used the facilities and left. But I was curious about the anachronistic design, so I came back the next day to photograph it. That's when I met him. Him! The previous Marcus. The one who found the room 36 years before I did, in 1951. He'd been trapped here ever since, aging normally but unable to leave. My hands were shaking now. That's impossible. I thought so too. But he knew things about me that no one else could know. Details about my family, my childhood, my dreams. He was me, just older, much older. What happened to him? He faded away when I arrived. That's what happens when the next iteration finds the room. The previous one simply ceases to exist. I watched him dissolve like smoke, all those years of life just gone. I stood up and began pacing the small space. This is insane. You're telling me that every 36 years, a Marcus Blackwood finds his bathroom and gets trapped here? Not just finds it, is led to it. The building calls to us somehow, draws us here. We always think we're coming for legitimate reasons. Work assignments, photography projects, historical documentation. But really, we're just responding to a summons we don't understand. Why, 36 years. That was the duration of the original experiment. What experiment? A long pause. The one our great-grandfather conducted, Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, founder of Blackwood Industries. I pulled the newspaper from my camera bag and looked at the photograph again. The man in this picture? Our great-grandfather. The one our family never talked about. The one whose existence was erased from our family history. He was a brilliant scientist, but his experiments, they opened something that shouldn't have been opened. What kind of experiments? Temporal research. He was trying to create stable time loops for commercial applications. Imagine being able to send information back in time to your younger self. Stock tips, lottery numbers, advanced knowledge of historical events. It would have been the ultimate insider trading scheme. I studied the newspaper article more carefully. The text was dense with technical jargon, but I caught fragments about chronodin field manipulation and temporal anchor points. But something went wrong, terribly wrong. Instead of creating a controllable loop, the experiment tore a hole in the fabric of time itself. This bathroom is ground zero, the point where the temporal field is strongest. It exists simultaneously in multiple time periods, always October 10th, always 2:47 p.m. I looked at my phone. The frozen time display suddenly made sense. So we're stuck in 1987? We're stuck in all of them. Every October 10th since the experiment began. Past, present, and future, all compressed into a single moment. I spent the next several hours talking with my future self, trying to understand the full scope of what had happened to our family. According to him, Dr. Jonathan Blackwood had been conducting temporal experiments in a secret laboratory hidden in the basement levels of the Meridian building. The building was constructed specifically to house the laboratory, he explained. Meridian Development Corporation was a front company. All that money that appeared from nowhere, it came from Blackwood Industries, which got it from future stock market information. A bootstrap paradox. Exactly. Our great-grandfather used knowledge from the future to fund experiments that would eventually provide him with that same knowledge. But when the loop destabilized, it trapped everyone who was in the building at the time of the experiment. Everyone. Hundreds of people. Office workers, security guards, maintenance staff, visitors. They're all still here, Marcus, trapped in their own temporal loops throughout the building. This explained the missing security guard, the cut padlock, the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with the building. It wasn't abandoned. It was occupied by temporal prisoners. Can we help them? I've tried. For 36 years, I've tried to find a way to break the loop, to free everyone trapped here. But the control systems are locked away in the basement laboratory, and I can't get there from this room. Why not? Because leaving this room before the loop resets would risk tearing the entire temporal field apart. If the anchor point is disrupted, everyone trapped here might simply cease to exist. I examined the bathroom more carefully, looking for any detail I might have missed. Behind the largest stall, I noticed something peculiar. A small access panel in the wall, painted the same white as the surrounding tiles, but slightly raised from the surface. What's behind that panel? Don't. His voice was sharp with warning. Marcus, don't open that panel. I've spent 36 years resisting temptation, and you need to do the same. Why? What's behind it? A choice. The worst kind of choice. But I was already working at the panel with my pocket knife, carefully prying at the edges. The paint cracked, revealing that the panel was actually a small door held in place by magnetic latches. Inside was a computer terminal. Primitive by modern standards, all green text on a black screen. The display showed several options. Temporal field status, stable loop iteration, 2,847 current subjects, 847 emergency protocols, available. What does field collapse mean? I asked. My future self's voice was heavy with despair. It means ending everything. The entire temporal field, all the loops, everyone trapped here. Complete annihilation. But it would free them, wouldn't it? You don't understand. Field collapse doesn't just end the loops. It erases them from having ever existed. Everyone who's been trapped here for the past 70 years would simply never have been born. Their entire timelines would be deleted from reality. I stare at the screen, understanding the horrible choice my great-grandfather had built into his failed experiment. Save the hundreds of people trapped in temporal loops by erasing them from existence entirely, or leave them imprisoned forever in their repeating moments. What about the dual authorization options? They require two people to activate simultaneously from different terminals. There's another control panel in the basement laboratory, but what? But reaching it would require leaving this room, and if I leave before the loop resets, the temporal field becomes unstable. The safeguards might fail, causing a field collapse anyway. What if I went instead? You'd face the same risk. And besides, even if you reach the basement, you'd need me to activate the shutdown from here at exactly the same moment. The timing has to be precise. A difference of even a few seconds could cause a catastrophic cascade failure. I studied the terminal more carefully, trying to understand the technical readouts. According to the display, the temporal field was powered by something called a chronoton resonance cascade that drew energy from the temporal differential itself. Essentially, the system was powered by the very time distortion it created. How long do we have before the loop resets? About 4 hours. At 6:47 p.m., the field cycles back to its starting point, and I forget everything that happened. I become you again, 28 years old, confused, trapped in a bathroom that shouldn't exist. And then what? I age 36 years and wait for the next Marcus to arrive. Unless we find another solution. I looked at the computer terminal again, focusing on a line of text I'd missed before. Emergency override. Temporal anchor disruption warning. High probability of existential cascade activation requires admin authorization. What's an admin authorization? Silence from outside the door. What's admin authorization? I repeated. His voice was barely a whisper. It's a genetic lock. Only a direct descendant of Dr. Jonathan Blackwood can activate it, which means either of us could do it. Yes, but Marcus, you have to understand, an existential cascade doesn't just erase the people trapped here. It could potentially unravel the entire timeline. Everything that's happened since 1951 could be undone. I thought about this. My entire life, everyone I'd ever known, every moment I'd experienced, all of it depended on a timeline that had been corrupted by my great-grandfather's experiments. What if the timeline deserves to be unraveled? What if everything that's happened since 1951 is wrong? You'd be condemning billions of people to non-existence. People who might never have existed in the first place, if not for the temporal manipulation. It was the ultimate philosophical question. Is it better to preserve a corrupted reality or risk everything for the chance of a clean timeline? I spent the next 3 hours in intense debate with my future self, exploring every possible option and consequence. He told me stories of the other people trapped in the building. Maria Santos, a secretary who'd been typing the same letter for 70 years. David Chun, a security guard who walked the same patrol route every day. Dozens of others, all imprisoned in their own temporal loops. They're not living, Marcus. They're just existing, repeating the same actions over and over without any awareness of the repetition. Is that really better than non-existence? At least they are. Existing is still something. But what about their families? Their children who were never born because their parents were trapped here? Their contributions to society that never happened? We're not just talking about the people in this building. We're talking about generations of descendants who never existed because of the temporal distortion. As the reset time approached, I found myself no closer to a decision. Every option seemed to carry unacceptable consequences. That's when I noticed something else on the computer terminal. A diagnostic log that had been scrolling slowly in the background throughout our conversation. Most of the entries were routine system status updates, but one caught my attention. Temporal integrity warning. Field instability detected cause. Dual consciousness paradox recommendation. Immediate resolution required estimated time to cascade failure. 47 minutes. The field is failing anyway, I said. The system can't handle having two versions of the same person active simultaneously. My future self was quiet for a long moment. I know. I've known for years. Every time a new Marcus arrives, the temporal field becomes a little more unstable. Eventually, it's going to collapse on its own. How many more iterations do we have? Maybe 1 or 2. This might be the last chance to control how it happens. I looked at the countdown timer on the screen. 23 minutes until cascade failure. If the field collapses on its own, what happens? Uncontrolled temporal implosion. Reality in a 50-mile radius gets compressed into a single point and then nothing. Chicago, everyone in it, everything that's ever happened here, gone. And if I trigger the emergency override, control collapse. The timeline resets to 1951, before the experiment began. Everything that's happened since then gets erased. But reality continues forward on a clean track. I thought about my life, my career, my relationships, my memories. All of it would disappear as if it had never happened. But millions of people would live who had never been born because of the temporal corruption. The timer showed 18 minutes. If I do this, will I still exist in the new timeline? A version of you will. A Marcus Blackwood born to a different family, living a different life. But not you, not the person you are now. And the people trapped in the building, they'll go back to 1951 and live their lives normally, get married, have children, contribute to society. They'll never know they were ever trapped. 14 minutes. I placed my hand on the computer terminal's authorization scanner. The screen flickered and displayed, genetic match confirmed, authorization pending. I'm going to do it, I said. Marcus, wait. Think about this. Everyone you've ever loved, every relationship you've ever had, every moment of happiness, it'll all disappear, but other moments will take their place. Different moments, maybe better ones, or maybe worse. There's only one way to find out. 10 minutes. If you do this, no one will remember you. No one will remember any of us. That's okay. Maybe it's better that way. I initiated the emergency override sequence. The terminal requested a final confirmation. Warning. Temporal reset will erase all events since 1951. All current consciousness will be discontinued. New timeline will begin from reset point confirm authorization. Y/N. 7 minutes until uncontrolled collapse. I typed Y and pressed enter. The building began to shake. Not the gentle vibration of settling concrete, but a deep, fundamental trembling, as if reality itself was coming apart at the seams. The fluorescent lights flickered wildly, and I could hear sounds from throughout the building. Voices calling out, footsteps running, the ambient noise of a building full of people suddenly awakening from their temporal sleep. "It's working," my future self said, his voice filled with wonder. "I can feel it. The loops are breaking." The shaking intensified. Through the bathroom walls, I could hear the sound of windows shattering and metal groaning. The Meridian building was tearing itself apart as 70 years of compressed time unwound in minutes. "Marcus," the voice called from outside the door, "I want you to know this was the right choice." "How can you be sure?" "Because for the first time in 36 years, I feel hope." The lights went out. In the darkness, I felt the building dissolving around me, reality unraveling like a sweater with a pulled thread. The bathroom floor fell away beneath my feet, and I was falling through time itself, watching decades flash by in reverse. I saw the Meridian building under construction, its concrete floors being poured, its steel framework rising from the ground. I saw the empty lot where it would stand, then the older buildings that had stood there before. Further back, the neighborhood as it had been in the early 1900s, then empty prairie, then forest. I was falling toward 1951, toward a moment of reset, where everything would begin again. And in that moment of falling through collapsed time, I saw him, Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, my great-grandfather, standing in his laboratory in 1951, his hand hovering over a switch that would begin an experiment that would trap hundreds of people for 70 years. He looked exactly as he had in the newspaper photograph, but younger, filled with the confidence of a man about to make history. He could see me somehow, this falling ghost from a timeline that was being erased. Our eyes met across the decades, and I saw recognition there. He knew what I was, what I represented. "Don't do it," I tried to say, but I had no voice in this place between moments. The experiment fails. It traps everyone. But he couldn't hear me, or perhaps he chose not to. I watched him flip the switch, watched the machinery come to life, watched the temporal field begin to form. And then I was falling past that moment too, into darkness, into nothingness, into the void between what was and what would be. I woke up in a hospital bed. The room was bright and clean, with that particular smell of disinfectant and floor wax that all hospitals seem to share. Sunlight streamed through windows, and I could hear the normal sounds of a functioning medical facility. Nurses talking in the hallway, machines beeping, the distant intercom calling doctors to various departments. "You're awake," said a voice I didn't recognize. I turned my head to see a middle-aged woman in a white coat standing beside my bed. She had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the tired look of someone who'd been working long shifts. "I'm Dr. Elizabeth Morrison," she said. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." 3 days. My voice was hoarse, as if I hadn't used it in much longer than 3 days. "What happened to me?" "You were found in the ruins of a building collapsed downtown, the Meridian office complex. Do you remember anything about how you got there?" I tried to remember, but my mind felt foggy, disconnected. Images flashed through my consciousness. A dark bathroom, a computer terminal, the feeling of falling through time, but they seemed more like fragments of a dream than actual memories. I'm not sure. I think I was photographing the building. Dr. Morrison consulted a chart. "According to your identification, you're Marcus Blackwood, freelance photographer, but there's no record of you having permission to enter that building. It was condemned and scheduled for demolition. Demolished. The entire structure collapsed 3 days ago. Engineers are calling it a catastrophic structural failure. Apparently, there were serious flaws in the original construction that finally gave way. You're lucky to be alive. You were found in what used to be the basement level, unconscious but largely uninjured. I sat up in bed, wincing at the stiffness of my muscles. Was anyone else hurt? That's the strangest part. The building collapse was massive, 37 floors of concrete, and steel reduced to rubble. By all rights, there should have been dozens of casualties. But you were the only person found in the debris. What about the office workers? Security guards? Dr. Morrison looked puzzled. Mr. Blackwood, that building has been empty for over 10 years. There were no office workers or security guards. Just you. I tried to process this information, but something felt fundamentally wrong. In my confused memories, I could swear the building had been occupied, full of people trapped in some kind of temporal loop, but that made no sense. The strange thing is, Dr. Morrison continued, we found some unusual items in your possession, objects that don't match the timeline of when you would have entered the building. She reached into a drawer beside my bed and pulled out a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a folded newspaper. This was in your camera bag. It's dated October 10th, 1987, but the paper quality suggests it's actually from that time period. We had it analyzed, the ink, the paper stock, everything checks out as authentic. But that's impossible, isn't it? I stared at the newspaper through the plastic bag. The Chicago Tribune, October 10th, 1987. I could just make out the headline. Meridian Tower Grand Opening Celebration. Can I see it? Dr. Morrison hesitated. The police will want to ask you some questions when you're feeling better. This is part of their investigation. Investigation of what? The building collapse wasn't entirely natural, Mr. Blackwood. There's evidence of some kind of explosion or energy discharge in the basement levels. The FBI is treating it as a potential terrorism case. FBI? Terrorism? None of this made sense. I rubbed my temples, try to clear the fog from my mind. There's something else, Dr. Morrison said. We contacted your emergency contact, a woman named Rebecca Torres from the city planning office. But there's no record of anyone by that name working for the city. In fact, there's no record of you being hired to photograph the Meridian building at all. This was getting more confusing by the minute. Rebecca Torres had definitely existed. She called me, hired me, arranged for my access to the building. But if there was no record of her, Doctor, what's today's date? October 13th, 2023. The same date, but everything else was different. I had memories of a week that seemed to have never happened, of people who didn't exist, of events that left no trace except for a decades-old newspaper that shouldn't exist. I'd like to make a phone call, I said. Dr. Morrison handed me a phone. I dialed my own number, hoping to reach my answering machine and hear my own voice, something to anchor me to reality. The number was disconnected. I tried my landlord, my bank, my favorite restaurant. None of the numbers worked. It was as if Marcus Blackwood, freelance photographer, had never existed. But I was here. I was real. I could remember my life, my apartment, my work. How could all evidence of my existence have simply vanished? Unless the timeline reset had worked, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of returning to 1951, it had created a new branch of reality where certain events had never occurred, where Marcus Blackwood, the photographer, had never lived. But Marcus Blackwood, the person, still existed. Dr. Morrison was studying my chart again. There is one more thing, Mr. Blackwood. We ran a background check as part of the admission process, and we found something interesting about your family history. She pulled out a thick manila folder. According to genealogical records, you're the great-grandson of Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, founder of Blackwood Industries. The company was quite successful in the 1940s and 50s, involved in advanced scientific research. Your great-grandfather died in 1951 in what was described as a laboratory accident. What kind of laboratory accident? The details are classified, but it appears he was working on some kind of experimental project for the federal government. Something involving temporal physics. Theoretical research into the nature of time itself. I felt a chill run down my spine. What happened to the company after he died? It was dissolved immediately. All research was classified and transferred to other government facilities. Your family received a substantial settlement in exchange for agreeing never to discuss the nature of Dr. Blackwood's work. And the Meridian building? According to these records, it was built on the site of the original Blackwood Industries headquarters. But the construction was normal. No unusual circumstances. No mysterious funding sources. Just a standard office building that, unfortunately, had some serious structural flaws. Dr. Morrison closed the folder and looked at me with genuine concern. Mr. Blackwood, you've been through a traumatic experience. The mind sometimes creates elaborate fantasies to cope with trauma. If you're remembering things that don't match the historical record, that's not unusual. But I knew the truth. The timeline had reset just as I'd hoped it would. The temporal loops were broken. The people trapped in the Meridian building were free to live their lives in 1951. Dr. Jonathan Blackwood had died in his laboratory before his experiments could trap anyone. The only problem was that I remembered both timelines. The corrupted one where I'd lived my life as a photographer, and this new one where that life had never happened. A nurse knocked on the door and entered. Mr. Blackwood, there are some people here to see you. They say they're from the FBI. 2 agents in dark suits entered the room, showing their credentials to Dr. Morrison before approaching my bed. Mr. Blackwood, I'm Agent Sarah Chun, and this is Agent David Park. We'd like to ask you some questions about what you were doing in the Meridian building. I studied their faces, looking for any sign that they might be temporal refugees like myself, people who remember the other timeline, but they seemed completely normal, just federal agents doing their jobs. I don't remember much. I said honestly. We found some unusual readings at the collapse site, Agent Chin said. Electromagnetic anomalies, radiation signatures that don't match any known materials. Were you conducting any kind of experiments in the building? No, I was just looking for something. What were you looking for? I thought about how to answer that question. How could I explain that I'd been looking for evidence of my great-grandfather's temporal experiments? That I'd found a bathroom that existed in multiple time periods simultaneously? That I'd made a decision to erase 70 years of corrupted history? I was looking for the truth about my family. I said finally. Agent Park consulted his notes. Your great-grandfather, Dr. Jonathan Blackwood. We know about his work for the government. What made you think you'd find information about him in the Meridian building? I don't know. It was just a feeling. The agents exchanged glances. Agent Chin leaned forward. Mr. Blackwood, this is important. Did you find anything in the building? Any equipment, documents, or materials related to your great-grandfather's research? I thought about the computer terminal, the temporal field readings, the choice I'd made to reset the timeline. But in this new reality, none of that had ever happened. No, I said, I didn't find anything. Agent Park made a note. The building collapse was unusual, Mr. Blackwood. Our engineers are saying it happened from the inside out, as if some kind of massive energy release destabilized the entire structure. Are you sure you don't remember anything that might explain this? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Dr. Morrison had left on the bedside table, and the caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Go ahead and answer it, Agent Chin said, but keep it brief. I picked up the phone. Hello, Marcus. The voice was familiar, though I couldn't place it immediately. Marcus, is that you? Yes, who is this? It's Rebecca Torres. I've been trying to reach you for days. Are you all right? Rebecca Torres, the woman from the city planning office who supposedly didn't exist. Rebecca? Where are you? I'm at the hospital. I just heard about the building collapse. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never should have sent you there alone. I looked at the FBI agents, who were listening intently to my side of the conversation. Rebecca, I need to ask you something. What day did you first call me about the Meridian building job? What? Marcus, are you feeling all right? I called you on Tuesday, October 10th, 3 days ago. And what was the job? Documenting the building before demolition, just like we discussed. I felt a surge of relief. Rebecca Torres did exist in this timeline. The job had been real, but something was still wrong. Rebecca, how did you know I was in a hospital? I saw it on the news. The building collapsed. Your name listed as the only casualty. I've been worried sick. Can you come here? To the hospital? I need to see you. I'm already here, Marcus. I'm in the lobby. I looked at Agent Chun. There's someone I need to see. She might be able to help explain why I was in the building. The agent stepped outside to confer, while Dr. Morrison went to fetch Rebecca from the lobby. I lay back on the hospital bed, trying to piece together what had happened. The timeline had reset, but not completely. Some elements of corrupted timeline had carried over into the new one. I existed, but with no official record. Rebecca Torres existed, but the city planning office had no record of her. The Meridian building had collapsed, but for different reasons in this timeline. It was as if reality was still settling, still deciding which version of events would become permanent. A few minutes later, Rebecca Torres walked into my room, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. She looked exactly the same as I remembered, but she was wearing a badge that identified her as an employee of Blackwood Industries. Blackwood Industries, the company that had supposedly been dissolved in 1951. "Hello, Marcus," she said, and her smile was different now. Not warm and professional, but cold and calculating. "We need to talk." The FBI agents returned to find Rebecca Torres sitting beside my bed, speaking in low, urgent tones that stopped immediately when they entered the room. "And you are?" Agent Chen asked. Rebecca showed her identification. "Rebecca Torres, Blackwood Industries. Mr. Blackwood is one of our contractors." Agent Park studied her credentials carefully. Blackwood Industries was dissolved in 1951. The original company was, with a successor corporation, established in 1987 to continue Dr. Jonathan Blackwood's research under federal oversight. "Everything we do is classified, agents. I'm sure you understand." She handed Agent Chin a business card and a thick envelope. "These are the authorization codes for Project Temporal Guardian. I think you'll find we have jurisdiction here." The agent stepped outside to make phone calls while Rebecca turned back to me with that same cold smile. "Clever boy, Marcus. You almost succeeded." "Succeeded at what?" "Destroying everything your great-grandfather worked for. Do you have any idea how much effort we put into maintaining the temporal field over the past 70 years? My heart rate spiked, and the hospital monitors began beeping rapidly. "The field is still active?" "Of course it's still active. Did you really think one emergency override could undo 7 decades of careful temporal engineering? The reset didn't destroy the field, Marcus. It just created a parallel timeline." Rebecca pulled out what looked like a sophisticated tablet device. The screen showed a complex diagram of intersecting lines and nodes that I recognized as a temporal field map. "This is the current state of local space-time," she said. "Your little stunt created a branch point. Now we have 2 timelines running in parallel. The original corrupted one where hundreds of people are still trapped in temporal loops, and this new one where you exist but have no official history. That's impossible." "Is it?" You remember both timelines, don't you? You have memories of a life that never happened in this reality. That's because your consciousness exists at the intersection point between the two temporal branches. She was right. I could remember my apartment in Logan Square that didn't exist in this timeline. I could remember clients who had never hired me, relationships with people who didn't exist. What do you want from me? The same thing we've always wanted from the Blackwood family. Cooperation. Your great-grandfather made a deal with the government in 1951. His research would continue under federal oversight, and his descendants would assist with temporal maintenance when needed. Temporal maintenance? Rebecca tapped her tablet, and the diagram changed to show what looked like structural damage in the temporal field. Your reset attempt caused significant instability in both timelines. Reality is starting to bleed through at the intersection points. If we don't repair the damage soon, both timelines will collapse into each other, creating a paradox cascade that would destroy not just Chicago, but potentially the entire eastern seaboard. The FBI agents returned, their expressions grim. "Mr. Blackwood," Agent Chin said, "it appears you're going to be released into federal custody. There are some people in Washington who want to speak with you about your family's special obligations." "What if I refuse?" Rebecca laughed. "Refuse? Marcus, you don't understand. You're not just Marcus Blackwood anymore. You're a living temporal paradox, existing simultaneously in two different realities. If we don't stabilize your quantum signature soon, you'll literally tear yourself apart at the molecular level." As if to prove her point, I looked at my hand and saw that it was flickering slightly, like a badly tuned television signal. For a split second, I could see through my own flesh. "The process is already beginning," Rebecca continued. "You have maybe 48 hours before complete quantum decoherence. We can fix this, but only if you cooperate with the temporal maintenance protocols." Dr. Morrison entered the room with discharge papers. "Mr. Blackwood has been cleared for release, but I strongly recommend continued observation. His brain scan shows some unusual patterns that we haven't been able to explain. We'll take good care of him," Rebecca said. "Blackwood Industries has some of the most advanced medical facilities in the country." As I was helped into a wheelchair, I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror. The reflection looked wrong somehow. Sometimes younger, sometimes older, sometimes wearing different clothes. I was literally becoming unstable at the quantum level. Agent Chin pushed my wheelchair toward the hospital exit, while Agent Park walked alongside Rebecca, discussing what I assumed were the details of my transfer. "Where are you taking me?" I asked. "Somewhere you can get the help you need," Agent Chin replied, "and where you can help us prevent a temporal catastrophe." As we left the hospital, I saw something that confirmed my worst fears. The world outside looked normal at first glance, but if I focused carefully, I could see the bleeding. Street signs that flickered between different names. Buildings that appeared and disappeared. People walking by who sometimes looked completely different from one moment to the next. The timeline reset hadn't fixed anything. It had made everything worse. We drove through downtown Chicago, and I watched the city phase in and out of different versions of itself. Sometimes I saw the Chicago I remember from my original timeline. Sometimes I saw a different Chicago, one where different buildings had been constructed, different urban planning decisions had been made. And sometimes, for brief moments, I saw the Meridian building still standing, intact and occupied, with people moving behind the windows like trapped insects. The people in the loops, I said to Rebecca, are they still trapped? In the original timeline, yes. Your reset created a parallel reality, but it didn't free them. They're still there, still repeating the same moments over and over. Can we save them? That depends entirely on your cooperation, Marcus. The temporal field is incredibly delicate now. One wrong move and both timelines collapsed completely. We pulled up to a nondescript office building that I was certain hadn't existed when we'd started the drive. A sign by the entrance read, Blackwood Industries, Temporal Research Division. Welcome to your new home. Rebecca said as agents helped me out of the car. Your great-grandfather would be so proud. As we entered the building, I caught sight of a framed photograph in the lobby. It showed Dr. Jonathan Blackwood standing in front of the original Meridian building. But this time he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a woman who looked exactly like Rebecca Torres. The photograph was dated in 1951. Impossible, I whispered. Rebecca followed my gaze and smiled. Time travel isn't the only thing your great-grandfather discovered, Marcus. He also found ways to extend human life far beyond its natural limits. I've been maintaining the temporal field for 70 years, waiting for the day when another Blackwood would be needed. You're 70 years old? I'm 93, actually, but thanks to Dr. Blackwood's longevity treatments, I'm still in my prime. The elevator doors opened to reveal an older man in a lab coat. He was tall, distinguished, with graying hair and intense eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked exactly like Dr. Jonathan Blackwood from a newspaper photograph. "Hello, Marcus," he said in a voice I recognized. The same voice that had spoken to me from outside the bathroom door. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you. You're supposed to be dead." He laughed. "Death is just another temporal state. My boy, with the right equipment. It can be reversed, postponed, or avoided entirely. I've been supervising the temporal maintenance project for the past 70 years. But I saw you die in a laboratory accident. You saw one version of me die in one timeline. But I exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously. It's really quite liberating once you get used to it." The elevator rose to a floor that shouldn't exist in a building this size, opening onto a vast laboratory filled with equipment I didn't recognize. Banks of monitors showed temporal field readings, and in the center of the room stood a machine that looked like a more advanced version of the computer terminal I'd found in the bathroom. "This is the master control station," Dr. Blackwood explained. "From here, we can monitor and adjust temporal fields across multiple timelines. It's taken decades of perfect, but we can now maintain stable time loops indefinitely." "Why?" I asked. "Why trap all those people?" "Because trapped time is controllable time. Within the loops, we can study temporal mechanics without the chaos of free-flowing causality. The people in the loops aren't suffering, Marcus. They're contributing to the greatest scientific endeavor in human history." Rebecca approached one of the control panels. "The timeline you created is still unstable. We need to make a decision. Either merge the two realities back together, or stabilize them as permanent parallel timelines." "What's the difference?" Dr. Blackwood pointed to a large screen showing the temporal field diagram. "Merging them would free the people trapped in the loops, but would also erase this timeline entirely. You, and everyone who exists only in this reality, would cease to exist. And if we keep them separate, the people remain trapped, but both realities continue. You get to live, Marcus, but at the cost of hundreds of other lives." It was the same choice I'd faced in the bathroom, but now I understood the full scope of the consequences. Save myself and condemn others to eternal imprisonment, or sacrifice everything for the chance of setting them free. But there was something else, something that had been nagging at me since I'd awakened in the hospital. "You've been planning this, haven't you?" "My entire life, everything that led me to the Meridian building. It was all orchestrated." Rebecca and Dr. Blackwood exchanged glances. "The temporal field requires periodic maintenance," Dr. Blackwood admitted. "Every 36 years, the field becomes unstable and needs to be recalibrated. We've always used members of the Blackwood family for this purpose. Our genetic signature is uniquely compatible with the temporal frequencies. So there really were other versions of Marcus before me? Oh, yes. Many of them. Each one played their part in maintaining the field, and each one made the same choice you're about to make, which is Dr. Blackwood gestured toward the master control station. Help us stabilize the field permanently. Use your quantum signature to lock both timelines in place. You'll save your own existence and everyone in this reality, while ensuring that our research can continue indefinitely, and the people trapped in the loops will remain as they are. But Marcus, think about this logically. They're not conscious of their imprisonment. From their perspective, they're living normal lives. Is it really so terrible? I looked around the laboratory at the machines that had been built on the suffering of hundreds of innocent people, at Rebecca Torres, who had lived for nearly a century maintaining a system of temporal slavery, at my great-grandfather, who had cheated death itself to continue his experiments. And I made my choice. No, I said simply. No. Dr. Blackwood looked genuinely surprised. I won't help you maintain the prison. I'm going to shut it down permanently this time. Marcus, you don't understand the consequences. But I was already moving toward the master control station, my flickering hands reaching for the emergency shutdown controls. This time, there would be no half measures, no parallel timelines, no temporal engineering tricks. This time, I was going to free everyone. The laboratory erupted in alarms as I initiated the complete field collapse sequence. Rebecca and Dr. Blackwood rushed toward me, but it was too late. Reality began to unravel around us, both timelines collapsing back toward their original starting point in 1951. I felt myself falling through time again, but this time I wasn't alone. Everyone who had ever been trapped in the temporal loops was falling with me, finally free to live their lives. As the world dissolved into white light, I heard Dr. Blackwood's voice one last time. You don't know what you've done, but I did know. I'd chosen freedom over safety, truth over comfort, and the right of hundreds of people to live their lives over my own right to exist. It was the right choice. It was the only choice. I woke up on a park bench in downtown Chicago. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed impossibly vivid after the sterile white of collapsing temporal field. My body ached like I'd been sleeping rough for days, and my clothes were different, older, worn, as if I'd been wearing them for much longer than I could remember. People walked past on their way to work. Normal people living normal lives in what appeared to be a completely normal timeline. No flickering reality, no temporal bleeding, no buildings that shouldn't exist. I checked my pockets and found a wallet with identification that listed my name as Marcus Blackwood, but with a different address, a different date of birth. According to the ID, I was 34 years old instead of 28. And I lived in an apartment in Wicker Park I'd never seen before. But I remembered everything. Both timelines, the temporal loops, the choice I'd made to free the prisoners at the cost of my own existence. Somehow, my consciousness had survived the collapse and found a new place in the restored timeline. I walked to the corner where the Meridian building should have stood and found an empty lot, not recently demolished, just empty, as if nothing had ever been built there. A small historical marker indicated that the site had once been a location of Blackwood Industries, a research company that had operated from 1947 to 1951. According to the marker, Dr. Jonathan Blackwood had died in a laboratory accident on October 10, 1951, and the company had been dissolved immediately afterward. The site had remained empty ever since, designated as a memorial park for the victims of the accident. I counted the names on the memorial plaque. 237 people had died in an explosion that destroyed the original Blackwood Industries building, but now they were listed as victims, not as test subjects or temporal prisoners. In this timeline, they had died quickly instead of being trapped for decades. It was a tragedy, but it was honest. No lies, no cover-ups, no secret government programs. Just a scientist who had pushed too far and paid the ultimate price, along with everyone who had trusted him. I found a coffee shop and used their Wi-Fi to search for information about myself. Marcus Blackwood existed in this timeline, but as a completely different person. I was listed as a freelance journalist instead of photographer, specializing in investigative stories about corporate malfeasance and government cover-ups. My apartment in Wicker Park was real, and when I took the L there, I found it filled with research materials about temporal physics, government conspiracies, and the hidden history of Chicago's urban development. Apparently, this version of Marcus Blackwood had been investigating the Blackwood Industries story for years. On my desk was a manuscript titled The Time That Never Was, a true account of temporal experiments in 1950 Chicago. According to the computer's file history, I'd been working on it for 3 years. I opened the document and began reading my own words. In 1947, Dr. Jonathan Blackwood founded a research company with a stated goal of revolutionizing human understanding of time itself. What he actually created was a temporal weapon that would have enslaved hundreds of innocent people in an eternal prison of repeated moments. This is the story of how that weapon was destroyed by someone who understood that freedom is always worth more than safety, and that the right to live is more important than the right to exist. I scrolled to the end of the manuscript and found something that made my heart race. The final chapter was titled The Choice of Marcus Blackwood, and it told the story of a man who found himself trapped in a temporal loop and had chosen to sacrifice everything to free the prisoners. But this version of the story was written as fiction, as if the other Marcus, the photographer from the corrupted timeline, had been just a character in a novel, except for one detail. At the very end of the manuscript was a note that read, "For the man who made the hard choice wherever and whenever he may be, thank you." I understood then. Both versions of Marcus Blackwood existed in this timeline. The journalist who investigated the story and the photographer who lived it. The temporal collapse hadn't erased me. It had merged me with my alternate self, combining both sets of memories and experiences into one person. I was the investigative journalist who had spent years researching the Blackwood Industries cover-up, and I was also the photographer who had experienced the temporal loops firsthand. I had the knowledge to tell the true story, and the platform to make sure it was heard. I spent the rest of that day reading through the research materials scattered throughout my apartment. This timeline's Marcus had uncovered most of the truth through years of careful investigation. The government cover-up, the secret funding, the real purpose of Dr. Blackwood's experiments. But he'd been missing the crucial details, the human cost, the personal experience of temporal imprisonment. Now I had those details. I opened a new document and began typing. My name is Marcus Blackwood, and I am the great-grandson of Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, the man whose temporal experiments nearly condemned hundreds of people to eternal imprisonment. This is the true story of what happened in the Meridian building, told by someone who was there. Some will say this story is impossible, that time travel is science fiction, that temporal loops can't exist, that consciousness can't survive the collapse of reality itself. To those people, I offer only this. The truth is often impossible until it happens. And this did happen. All of it. The bathroom that existed in multiple time periods. The voices of people trapped in endless repetition. The choice between safety and freedom that every generation must make. I made that choice. I chose freedom. I chose truth. And I would make the same choice again, no matter the cost. As I wrote, I could feel the memories of both timelines settling into place, becoming part of a single, coherent narrative. The photographer and the journalist, the trapped victim and the outside investigator, the man who experienced the impossible and the man who spent years trying to understand it. I was all of them now, and I had work to do. The story needed to be told. The truth needed to be shared. The people who had died in 1951 deserved to be remembered as human beings, not as test subjects or temporal prisoners. And somewhere, in whatever corner of the multiverse such things exist, the people I had freed by collapsing the temporal field deserved to know that their sacrifice had meant something. I wrote through the night, and when the sun rose over Chicago on October 11th, a date that now meant something completely different, I had finished the first chapter of what would become the definitive account of Blackwood Industries' experiments. It would take me 2 more years to complete the book, and another year to find a publisher willing to print such an unbelievable story. When The Restroom That Never Was finally published, most reviewers dismissed it as an elaborate science fiction novel. But some people believed. Scientists working on cutting-edge temporal physics read it and recognized truths that hadn't been published anywhere else. Government officials who had inherited files from the 1950s cover-up read it and quietly confirmed details that should have been classified forever. And every October 10th, I received letters from people who claimed to have memories of living the same day over and over, of being trapped in moments that repeat endlessly. They remember being freed, suddenly and inexplicably, on a day when reality itself seemed to shift and change. They remember being saved by someone who was willing to sacrifice everything for their freedom. I don't know if these letters are from people who were actually trapped in temporal loops, or if they're from individuals whose dreams have been influenced by reading my book. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the story has been told. The truth has been shared. And in a world where the powerful often choose safety over freedom, comfort over justice, existence over life, that truth serves as a reminder. Sometimes the right choice is a hard choice. Sometimes freedom is worth any price. And sometimes the only way to save everyone is to be willing to lose everything. That's the lesson Dr. Jonathan Blackwood never learned. That's the choice his great-grandson made for him. And that's why, on quiet nights when the city sleeps and the temporal echoes of collapsed timelines whisper through the darkness, I sleep peacefully knowing that hundreds of people who should have been prisoners are living free lives instead. It was worth it. All of it was worth it.